When the early sunlight woke me, we were almost at the haven mouth, and slipping past Chelsea, with its grey pile of buildings, on the first of the ebb tide. The wind was in the northeast, with a springtime coldness in it, but it was fair for Normandy, and there was no sea running under the land. We were well out at sea, therefore, ere Elfric, almost as worn out as I, came from his close quarters forward and stood by me, looking over the blue water of the channel to where the Isle of Wight loomed to the westward. "Now I think that all is well, Redwald," the abbot said, "and every mile from the English shore takes us further from danger." And so we stood and talked in the waist of the ship, and Edward came and joined us. The men ate their breakfast forward, and brought us some, and the two churchmen came out with the little atheling, and then Sister Sexburga, as I called her, came and shivered in the cold breeze and spoke to Bertrick, who was alone on the after-deck steering, and so went back to the cabin, where the Queen had all things needful for breaking her fast. Then Bertrick whistled sharply, and I looked up at him. He pointed away to the eastward, and out to sea. There I saw far off on the skyline the sails of two ships that grew larger as I watched them. I went to the break of the after-deck and climbed up beside him. "Men say that two ships passed westwards tonight, master," he said. "Here be two more heading over from the south." "Can you tell what they are?" I asked him. "Longships, as I think," he answered. "We shall know betimes." The vessels hove up quickly, for our great brown sail bore us more or less across their course. "It is safer to hold on, master," he said, "for to up helm and fly would be to bring them after us if they are Vikings. They will see that we are not laden with cargo, and will not pay heed to us therefore." It was but half an hour after that when we knew that the two ships were Danish war vessels, and that they were laying a fresh course to overhaul us. Nor was there any chance of our escaping them. They were thrice as fast as we. Then I feared greatly, for I knew not what would happen. It might be that they would let our party go on, finding them to all seeming naught but church folk, but one could not tell, and I feared. So also did Elfric when I went to him and told him what these ships were, and that they were bearing down on us. "We cannot fight," he said. "We must let things be as the Lord will." "If any roughness is shown to the womenfolk," I said, "there will be one man who will fight." "And will lose his life for naught," he answered. "If the worst comes to the worst, we must even do as the Queen has bidden us before now. We must proclaim her, and then we shall be safe from harm, if captives to naught. Tell me, have you heard that he is cruel to those he takes?" "Rather I have heard that he is not," I said. "Moreover, if Emma of Normandy suffers aught at his hands, he will have the Duke to deal with very shortly." "Now are we in the Lord's hands," said Elfric, for a hoarse hail came from the leading ship, which was to windward of us. She was a splendid dragon ship, bright with gold and color. "What will you have me do, master?" Bertrick cried to me. "They can do what they will with us whatever we try." "We may fare better by obeying," I said, for in truth there was naught else to do. Now the great ship ranged up alongside of us, and the tall warrior at the helmsman's side hailed us again to heave to. And I saw a man bend his bow, and an arrow flew down the wind and stuck in the deck not far from me. Whereon Bertrick raised his arm in answer and called to his men, and luffed while they lowered the sail. The Dane at the same time struck sail, and got out some oars in order to come alongside of us. There was no sea running that would make this dangerous. Then I went to the low door of the after cabin, and spoke to the Queen. "Here is a ship that will come alongside ours," I said. "Fear not, but wait for my word." And then a glint of bright color caught my eyes, and I looked more closely into the dark place, and there sat the Queen no longer as a humble abbess, but in her own dress, for she had cast off the garb she hated, and she answered me. Who dares to stay the Queen of England on her passage?" "Oh, madam," I said, "for pity's sake don the convent robe again. I fear that the Danes are on us." Then she cowered back into the shadow and said naught, for the very word terrified her when she knew her foes were so near. But Sister Sexburga came to the door, and she was pale enough, though her face lacked no courage. "What shall we do, Redwall Thane?" she said quickly. "Keep a brave heart, sister," I answered, "and let me manage all. I will bide before the door, and you will hear all I say. Then, if I say that we have the Queen of England, let our mistress come forward and disclose herself. But I hope they will let us go free. Pray that it may be so." Then the two ships jarred together, and I saw that the Dane was well manned with armed warriors, and I also saw that their leader was Egil Thorarensen, whom I had captured and again lost at Levenheath fight. I will say that I was glad to see him, for I knew him as a free-spoken warrior who loved fair play, and I thought that he owed me a life, for I did not slay him when I might. They leapt on board a dozen armed Danes with Egil at their head, and there before them stood Elfric the abbot with his cross in his hand, facing them alone. His priests were forward under cover, praying doubtless, with the athelings. The great ship sheered off again, and bighted within half arrow-shot of us, all her rail crowded with men looking on. "Neither gold nor goods have we," Elfric cried. "We are peaceful folk who cross the seas. It is the part of a good warrior and Viking to let such go unharmed." "Aye, so it is," answered Egil, "but, as it happens, we are looking for certain peaceful folk." "You will not harm us," said Elfric, who knew not of our queen's foolishness. "It is but a party of church people who go to Normandy." "Put the holy man aside," said Egil to his men. "We are not heathens, and we will not hurt you, father." So the warriors laughed, and went to draw Elfric away, but when he saw that I stood before the cabin door, he stepped aside by himself and watched what should befall. I had no mail on, and at first they did not notice me. It was the first day that I had not worn mail since we left London, but Fosbane was loose in the scabbard, and ready in case of need. "Ho, skipper!" Egil cried, "Whom have you on board?" "Yon priest and some more of his sort," Bertrick said. "We have lit on a crow's nest," a man said, laughing. "Where are they, then?" "In the forepeak, and aft here, deadly sick," said Bertrick. Then Egil's eyes lit on me, and he stared for a minute. "Ho," he cried, "here is no crow, but a stout warrior enough. What do you here, Olaf's right-hand man?" "Helping the crows overseas," I said, trying to meet his words lightly, though my heart was heavy enough. "Why then, friend," he said, "I must see these charges of yours. Stand aside, and let me go into that cabin." "Nay, Egil, they are but nuns here." The honest warrior looked puzzled, but some of his men began to crowd aft, being tired of the parley, and one tried to push me aside, saying, "Let us fetch them out, and waste no more words." Whereon I sent him reeling against the gunwale, hands to face, for I dealt with him even as Godric served my warrior at Stamford. Then I had my sword out, for it was time, and two men who drew sword on me went down on the deck before me. Sword Fosbane smote not amiss. Then was a ring of shouting Danes forming, and I felt someone at my shoulder, and Egil cried out, "Hold, men! The warrior is my man. Let me deal with him." And there was Sister Sexburga beside me, with Bertric's sword, that had hung over his berth, in her hand, and her eyes were flashing, and it seemed to me that she had used a sword before this, or had learnt its use. It was reddened now. The men gave back, and Egil came before me, and he was laughing. "That is enough, Redwald of Bears," he said. "I owe you a life, and you have it. If all your charges are like that maiden, we had better be gone. Little nunnery training is there about her swordplay." Then the sister shrank back into the cabin, and the men stared after her with a kind of awe, as at a Valkyrie of the old faith who had come to my help. There was a man whom she had smitten who was binding up a wound in his bare forearm. I believe that she stayed a shrewd blow from me. "Let us go, Egil," I said. "Presently, maybe. But I seek someone, and must needs see your people. No harm shall come to them." Then I thought that all was well, and I turned to the door and spoke. "Lady Abbess, you must needs come forward. I know this chief, and you need fear not." I heard Sister Sexburga's voice speaking low and pleadingly for a moment, and then all was lost. "I am the Queen of England," said Emma in her proud, shrill voice. "Begone, churls, and let me not." And bright in crimson and ermine she came from the cabin and stood swaying on the deck before Egil and his men, while round her train played heedlessly the yellow-maned black kitten, and that seemed strange. Egil bared his head and bowed before her. "Are you truly the queen?" he said. "Aye, knave. Who else should I be?" she answered. "Fetch me the old priest." "Nay, Redwald will tell me now," Egil said. "Does this lady speak truth?" "It is true," I answered. "Why should you hinder her going to the Duke, her brother, who will seek her at your hands?" Now Emma had been still during these words, looking with hard and scornful eyes at all before her, but now she spoke. "Let the sail be set again that I may go on my way. You shall surely answer for this hindrance." But no one stirred, though even the Danes were silent, for there is that in the tones of one who is wont to be obeyed which makes men listen whether they will or not. "Do you hear me?" she said, stamping her foot. "Redwald, see that I am obeyed. Drive these knaves into the sea, and let me be rid of them." Then Egil answered her, saving me trouble thereby, for I had naught to say. "Queen, we will do your bidding and hoist the sail. But my men and I must bide here." "I care not, so that you do not hinder my folk," she said. And with that she turned away, saying to the brave sister who yet stood beside her, "Let us seek shelter again, the wind is cold, and I am offended with the sight of these men." They went into the cabin and closed the door after them, and Egil and I looked at one another. Egil grinned, but I could not. Outside the door the kitten mewed restlessly in the cold wind to be taken in. "So," he said, "cheer up. This is not your fault, you almost won through. Had the queen come forth as an abbess, I think that I had left you for very shame. Priests and black cats are unlucky passengers, however. I think that I was never so angry as then. To lose all our pains for the safety of the queen, and that by reason of her own foolishness, was hard." Egil left me and went to Berkrick, and once more the sail was set, and the ship headed backward for the English coast. We had almost lost sight of it. The two longships ranged up on either side of us, shortening sail to keep us company. They took the two men whom I had slain and set them forward under some covering. Neither Egil nor his warriors bore me any grudge for their fall, which was in fair fight of their own making. After that Egil's men made the crew bring them what food and ale they had, and sat down below the foredeck quietly enough. They were courtmen of Jarl Thorkel's, as I thought, being better than the wild warriors who made the bulk of Knut's great host. Elfric came to me when all was quiet thus, and leant on the rail beside me for some time without speaking. We were making a long slant over to the English coast, and my heart was full of heavy thoughts, for I could not help wondering if this mischance had come about by my fault, and I was angry and sore that all the plans that I had made so confidently had come to naught. Presently the abbot said,